one would be great, my own personal rail line going from my house to LA. But how could I possibly do that? I don't have enough money to pay for that. Oh hell yeah, my favorite. 25-year-old equipment that barely works. Hello everyone, and do you have a lot of money and are bored out of your mind? Do you have a place that you and many others frequent that you just don't want to drive to anymore? Well, boy, do I have the thing for you!
Railroading on a budget. We wouldn't have it if BNSF didn't act like they were scraping their pockets for money, when in reality they could refurbish half their system in the snap of their fingers. Budget railroading isn't really a new practice. Sometimes you have a goal and don't have the money to do it, so you gotta make do with what you can get.
When starting a new railroad, companies who don't have enough financial backing to get brand new equipment will usually take in old hand-me-down equipment that other railroads don't need anymore, usually because of age.
A good example of this is the Auto Train Corporation. When they began operations back in 1971, they used old equipment from the various other railroads who, after canceling passenger operations in the 60s, had a bunch of old passenger equipment they didn't need and could easily sell. So, the Auto Train bought up a good amount of this old rolling stock, refurbishing most of it.
Past just acquiring old rolling stock, there were a few other methods to try and save money while trying to run a railroad, and a certain National Passenger Rail Organization is the king of these alternatives.
I'm, of course, talking about Amtrak. Because of how little funding they get, Amtrak has had to get pretty creative with how they save and spend money. A prime example of this is the Acela 1 train sets.
Amtrak didn't have enough money to actually own these train sets, so they sold them off to a private leasing company who would do all the nitty-gritty stuff and Amtrak would just own them. As previously mentioned, another pretty common practice for railroads to do is when they have existing locomotives that are getting old, they will sell them for dirt cheap for other railroads to buy.
A lot of railroads have done this. Caltrain, Amtrak, Metrolink, and many others will put their locos up for sale once they are ready for retirement.
Now, another pretty uncommon practice is when you are so unbelievably broke and are struggling so hard for money, you genuinely consider and almost go through with selling 2 brand new locomotives.
Who other than NCTD to be the one to try this? The story with this is NCTD bought an initial 5 Charger locomotives in 2018, which were delivered in 2020 and began operations in 2021. Also in 2020, once NCTD decided that they wanted more to fully replace their whole fleet, they ordered 4 more Chargers. 2 were funded by NCTD, locos 5006 and 5007. The other 2, which were extras for expanding service, were funded by Sandag, locos 5008 and good old unlucky 5009. When they arrived in mid-2023, NCTD found themselves in an odd situation. They were flat broke and had 4 brand new locomotives on hand, 2 of which they didn't technically need. So, what did they do?
Well, boss, I can either delete these old files that I absolutely don't need anymore and are taking up way too much space, or I can delete the brand new project that we just started.
Instead of selling their F59 PHIs that they really didn't need, they made the decision to sell 5008 and 5009, which after figuring out which ones were in the best condition, changed to 5007 and 5009. I don't call this thing unlucky for nothing. NCTD made a deal with Metrolink, which was, if they agreed, they would sell 5007 and 5009 to Metrolink for about $5 million. If Metrolink turned it down, then they would sell them to Caltrans for the same price. There was only one problem, however. Metrolink loves EMD, and they wanted the F125 instead of the Charger because 1, it had more horsepower, and 2, because it was made by EMD, a manufacturer they've been working with ever since their inception in 1992. Caltrans, while they do have 24 Chargers and ventures up in NorCal, it appears that after the subpar performance of the Surfliner Chargers, 2117. They have expressed that once they get their full order of ventures from Siemens, that will be it for all of the Siemens equipment they will be getting. Quick side note, I find it funny that Caltrans realized the Siemens stuff wasn't working for them and gave up, but they gladly decided to buy battery electric BEMUs like that isn't going to give them 5 times the problems.
So both Metrolink and Caltrans dropped out of the deal, meaning 5007 and 5009 remained in NCTD's hands.
And honestly, it's kind of a blessing neither of them got 5009 specifically, because again, I don't think that thing could get into more trouble if it tried. Thankfully though, NCTD did get a few grants after that, so they aren't necessarily broke anymore. Now their problem is they just don't have enough staff for the trains they run. My god, can NCTD have a good year for once?
Speaking of grants, that's another way railroads will often operate on a budget. They will just patiently wait until the government gives them money.
This is a pretty common practice among most railroads that aren't freight rail. Spending all your money, realizing you're cooked, and then not doing anything to make that money back, with you instead quietly waiting until the federal or state government throws money at you, if they ever do that. This spending is pretty different depending on the state you're in. Here in California, passenger rail has been getting a bunch of money, just half of it has been going to all of the wrong places. Hey, you know all that money you're sending over to get those goofy hydrogen and battery locos bought? Maybe you should realize that that won't work and realize that Sorrento to Miramar is a real thing. It's slow, can be straightened. You just need to put money into it. My God! Amtrak also rides government loans and grants like crazy. Recently, they have also gotten a massive grant, which is what's allowing them to buy 200 ALC series locos along with Aero. It's pretty well known that it is extremely hard for passenger rail to make a profit in the US. Brightline so far are the only ones to make a profit, and that was kinda going in and out. But they are at least doing better than good old BCTD over here.
Now another practice that's pretty uncommon nowadays is when a railroad is so unbelievably broke that they merge with another railroad to save costs, or they just go out of business and another railroad buys them out.
A good example of this is the planned Santa Fe and Southern Pacific merger. Back in the 80s, essentially, these two were not doing well, so they decided to cut their losses and tried to merge. The merger even got so far that some locos were painted into an interesting SPSF paint scheme, but the merger fell through, ending with Southern Pacific becoming a part of Union Pacific, and Santa Fe merging with the highly profitable Burlington Northern, forming BNSF, more commonly known as the Big Orange Thing that makes a lot of noise at 1 a.m.
The most infamous merger by far is the New York Central Railroad merging with the Pennsylvania Railroad, making Penn Central, also known as...
Holy crap, the entire dump is on fire. Calling this railroad a dumpster fire is an understatement. I could make a full video on the atrocity that the Penn Central was, but basically, imagine a Class 1 railroad mixed with Amtrak utilizing trackage, equipment, and management so bad, it makes NS look like SNCF.
Railroading on a budget is something that, especially here in the US, you can't really be proud of, but is very necessary a lot of the time.
It's no secret that passenger rail is nowhere near profitable, and often companies have to cut corners and do many weird things to make it by. And usually, most of these tactics will do the job to some extent, keeping the organization alive for a good few years in the future. Even if some of it relies on funding going to all the wrong places, I could care less about battery and hydrogen, just straight in Miramar already.